So I'm putting together a little video about zombies and their prevalence in video games for my other channel. This, of course, has led me to play the classic Resident Evil games, which I haven't done in, well, decades. In particular, I was really looking forward to playing Resident Evil Code Veronica again. It was the first in the series that I had really sat down to play all the way through, and thus I had some really fond memories of this game. Ah, those Halcyon Dreamcast days. But playing it again, especially having recently replayed the original trilogy, oh, man, I don't know. That's not to say that Code Veronica is an awful game. It maintains the core gameplay that made the prior 3 Resident Evil games great, and when it sticks to that formula, it's pretty solid overall. But Code Veronica strays off that path with usually bad results. Let's talk real quick about the tried and true survival horror recipe that Resident Evil 1 through 3 established. When we take a look at Resident Evil levels, or dungeons if that's your preferred nomenclature, our goal as the player character is to find our way out. A tangled knot of locked doors and other obstacles impedes us, and we need to solve assorted puzzles and find all manner of odd key items to unlock the path forward. Wallet, keys, a crystal cannonball with an ID card embedded in it, you know, basic everyday stuff. Put another way, Resident Evil dungeons are pretty much escape the room games, except it's escape the mansion or escape police headquarters instead. There's a wrinkle on this, though. We have a limited inventory in which to juggle these assorted adventure game knickknacks. Compounding this issue is our need to use the same space to carry ammo and healing items. Which brings us to our main ingredient. The zombies and other genetically engineered monsters are here to inject the other key flavor of survival horror: resource management. The survival horror genre is at its best when you have a lot of threats but not quite enough resources to deal with them all. What makes these games compelling is that moment to moment you have to weigh your options and frequently make some tough choices. The most common decision boils down to fight or flight. You're not going to have enough ammunition to kill every zombie. And unless you can slip tackles like an NFL running back, trying to dip and duck your way through the hordes of the Walking Dead is going to deplete your reserve of healing items in a hurry. The key emphasis is situational awareness. Got a lot of ammo, but not a lot of health? Maybe it's time to murder some monsters. Other way around, maybe think about where you can push through the crowd and how to make best use of your health pool until you get more ammo. And since you also need to set aside inventory space to store key items, you can't get around these problems by simply loading up. So this is starting to become a pretty compelling game loop on its own. But what's really going to make or break us here is level design. Another way to look at this is we can have a thoroughly tested recipe and quality ingredients, but if we're cooking with just a microwave, a metal bowl, and some plastic cutlery, our chances of successfully putting this dish together begin to plummet. This is especially true for the survival horror recipe we're talking about here. So what do I mean when I talk about level design, the cooking utensils and equipment in this tortured metaphor? Well, I'm not just talking about the map layout or plotting the player's path through the area. Those are important too, so we'll get back to them in a second. But first, what is most important to the survival horror recipe? It's the quantity and placement of both enemies and resources. Giving the player too many resources eliminates the need for decision making, essentially reducing our gameplay to a mind-numbing action shooter where we're mowing down zombies without concern. Too many monsters, and now we just have an extremely stressful obstacle course. From the producers of American Ninja Warrior comes Zombie Ninja Warrior. What's important here is to balance tension and relief. Now, the layout of the map plays a crucial role here as well. This is best seen in the first 2 Resident Evils, where both Spencer Mansion and the RPD headquarters exemplify strong survival horror level design. Both of these buildings feature a hub-like lobby area between 2 major wings. Within each of these wings are a cluster of interconnecting rooms and hallways, with plenty of locks and puzzles, which we mentioned earlier. This creates a satisfying back-and-forth scavenger hunt as the player ping-pongs from wing to wing looking for the next key item. Once in a wing, we never have to go too far to find something, and future puzzles are constantly being seeded into our heads. On top of this, these intricate levels provide many routes and paths from where we are and where we need to go, which further enhances the decision-making calculus. Do we take the route we know we've cleared out already? Or do we venture into unknown territory and risk encountering more monsters, but potentially gain some good resources? Getting back to the subject of this video, there's a reason I bring all of this up. Code Veronica's most egregious deficiency is, you guessed it, its level design. Instead of the tightly clustered dungeons of Resident Evils 1 and 2, the game space of Code Veronica is strewn out with long passages and highly linear segments, especially Rockford Island, the first part of the game. The most obvious consequence of this extruded level design is that the usual back and forth escape room puzzling now requires a lot of travel time. The worst example of this is the Ashford Manor atop this hill here, which is the end of a lengthy trail that starts from the back of yet another compound. Since you have to come here early, double back and then return later, this whole segment of the game feels like an absolute chore. It's not helped by the fact that Code Veronica loves to frequently respawn or repopulate rooms with monsters. Now, in prior Resident Evils, these sorts of state changes were a great way to keep the player on their toes. They'd usually occur after acquiring a major key item or some other significant game event. This really shakes up the player's routing. For example, a previously cleared corridor now has a whole host of zombies climbing in through the windows. These state changes help nudge the player to get them out of their comfort zone and to take paths less traveled. But in Code Veronica, they're way too frequent, to the point where they lose the element of surprise. And given the lack of paths when it comes to traversal, this makes several parts of the game a complete slog to move through. I definitely found myself in a resource drought in the early going as a result, though this was my first time back to tank controls, and that was certainly a factor. And while some high tension moments like this can be really exciting, they need to be punctuated by relief from time to time. Otherwise, tension simply becomes stress. I'd like to move on from Code Veronica's subpar level design, but I would be remiss to not mention the moths in Antarctica. I really try to curb my vulgarity in these videos, but holy what game design purpose do these annoying little serve? Burn in hell, you assholes! Oh, where were we? Well, let's move along to the narrative, which is also not good. Now, up to this point, the Resident Evil series was thoroughly marinated in horror, B-movie schlockiness. But that seemed to be the thematic and artistic target of the developers, and they calibrated the audience's expectations accordingly. That's to say that I think their good can't be fun for the most part. Code Veronica really ups the ridiculousness and schlock factor to their breaking points, especially Code Veronica X, the version I played for this review, where the game wears its cinematic influences of The Matrix and John Woo on its sleeve. Characters slow-mo diving with guns akimbo blasting away, or Albert Wesker doing his best Agent Smith impersonation really clash with the tone of dread and creepiness of survival horror that the series had built up, albeit inconsistently, to this point. Speaking of creepiness, we also have a rather dismal cast of characters, most notably the antagonist duo of the Ashford twins. On top of the Jamie and Cersei vibes here. Oh hey, a Game of Thrones Season 1 reference in 2024. I really have my finger on the pulse of pop culture, don't I? We have Alfred doing a super cliched, queer-coded villain bit, which is just lovely. Now, there's a decent explanation for why he cross-dresses, namely he's covering for his sister Alexia, who is doing a 20-year hibernation to metamorph into the Queen of Zombies or something. But still, Alfred's queer villainy is played straight, and it's not great. There's also something about how our villainous siblings are a foil for our brother and sister duo of Claire and Chris Redfield. Unfortunately, these two are pretty flat and static throughout our adventure here. That's less of an issue for Chris, who in my opinion has been a generic boring everyman protagonist up to this point, so this is just more of the same for him. Claire, however, really had a nice little turn acting as a big sister and protector for Sherry Birkin in Resident Evil 2. So in many ways, her lack of any real characterization here feels like a step back. She also inexplicably gets sidelined during the final confrontation of this game, despite showing herself to be more than capable throughout this whole fiasco, and that's a shame. As for the other characters, we of course have the embodiment of schlock in Albert Wesker.
Now the only existing sample is in your body. I want it. You're coming with me.
And, am I forgetting someone? Oh, right. Steve. Steve is the f***ing worst. Steve! 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 Oh, for sake, Steve. Steve really is the locus of Code Veronica's narrative issues, especially its rather clumsy and disjointed tone. On one hand, they were very clearly channeling a late 90s Leonardo DiCaprio teenage heartthrob here, but then Steve acts like a complete dipshit, so I'm not sure how well that pairing works. I don't think I was or am the target audience. We see him do the ridiculous action movie gunplay stuff, but he's also got this rather ham-fisted dramatic backstory about his father, and gosh, this character really feels cobbled together from spare parts, doesn't he? There's some other irksome things about Code Veronica. One that screams to mind is this handoff between Chris and Claire late game, where there's very little signposting presented to the player that this is going to happen. It's very easy for one character to end up with the lion's share of resources, screwing over the other character in the process. There's also a pair of sequences that are quite easy to fail, especially if you don't know they're coming. Combining this with a lack of checkpoints will have you replaying this very tedious part of the game over and over again. As I've stressed on this channel before, I don't have a problem with difficulty, but obtuseness, inconvenience, and frustration are not difficulty. So is Code Veronica all bad? Well, despite its awful level design, its clunky narrative, and poorly drawn characters, and a lot of other head-scratching decisions, there are some good things here. There's some decent puzzles in the mix, and the new for the time feature of fully 3D inventory items that you could rotate around while examining is a nice little touch. The step up in console generation and more powerful hardware allowed the dev team to fully render these scenes. This enabled them to play around with the camera a bit more. The camera follows the fixed perspective style of the prior games pretty closely, which I like, but we also get some tracking shots and other perspectives to add some visual variety. We see this in the Nosferatu boss fight, which grants the player a first-person camera while using a sniper rifle. I think this boss is pretty neat, and the novelty here really helps spice things up. We also have far more expressive characters than before, with eye and facial movements in real-time scenes. There's still a bit of clumsiness to be seen here, sure. The dev team were understandably inexperienced with these new techniques, but it's a pretty big leap forward for Resident Evil storytelling. I just wish the writing was better to match. Resident Evil Code Veronica is, more than anything, frustrating. It's built upon a solid foundation and brings some new technical tricks to the party, but ultimately it trips over itself in the end. I think we need to talk more about games like this here on the World Wide Web Information Superhighway series of tubes. Not every game is a masterpiece or abject excrement, but unfortunately, extreme opinions travel the fastest and furthest in our engagement-driven social media landscape these days. So you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to tackle these games that inspire what I like to call mixed emotions. We seriously need to invest more of our time and energy examining these sorts of misfits. The mostly good games that didn't quite stick the landing, or the janky or mediocre games that have some incredible concepts, or the games whose reach was simply beyond their grasp. Stay tuned, because I definitely have quite a few of these in mind. If you enjoyed this video, or found it insightful, how about you go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll be continuing Feartober next week with Paranormicite, so be sure to hit the bell so you're notified when that drops. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and catch you next time.